Ethan didn't see it coming. His life unraveled the moment he overheard a conversation that shattered his heart in ways he hadn't thought possible. Just minutes later, he stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, as his wife sat casually on his best friend's lap. Her smirk was like a blade, cutting through him with cruel precision. That night, the marriage certificate was reduced to scraps, and the wedding ring landed with a metallic clink at her feet. He walked out of the life he thought was real, but it wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. It was the beginning of Ethan's transformation. The house was alive with energy that evening. Friends and family filled every corner of Ethan and Claire's home to celebrate 12 years of marriage. Laughter and chatter mixed with the clinking of glasses, creating a warm, lively atmosphere. Claire's smile seemed to brighten the room as she moved effortlessly between conversations, her charm on full display. Upstairs, their kids played loudly with their cousins, the sound of their laughter echoing through the house. It was the kind of scene that could have been plucked straight from a feel-good family movie. "Ethan, honey, can you grab the wine from the kitchen?" "No, Claire called out, her voice cutting through the noise. Her smile lingered, but there was something off. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, give me a minute," Ethan replied, weaving his way through the crowd. As he glanced back at her, pride swelled in his chest. He admired the life they had built together, blissfully unaware of the dark truth lurking just out of sight. In the kitchen, as he uncorked the bottle of wine, faint voices drifted in from the hallway. His mother's drifted in from the hallway. Voice, usually calm and composed, carried an edge of urgency that stopped him in his tracks. Curiosity pulled him toward the doorway. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. "Are you out of your mind?" His mother hissed in a low, sharp whisper. "Ethan is here. He could walk in on you at any moment." Ethan's heart pounded. What was she talking about? Then he heard Claire's voice, dripping with disdain. "Let him catch us. So what? What's he going to do? Cry about it? He's too much of a spineless loser to do anything. He's just a walking wallet. I couldn't care less what that idiot thinks." Her words hit him like a sledgehammer, each one heavier than the last. Ethan stood there, frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The world tilted around him as questions raced through his mind. How long had this been happening? And why was his own mother involved? His chest tightened, but he knew he couldn't look away now. He had to see the truth with his own eyes. With his pulse hammering in his ears, Ethan stepped into the hallway. What he saw made his stomach churn. Claire lounged on Jason's lap, her fingers lazily combing through his hair. Her body language was as casual as if they were sharing a cup of coffee. The intimacy between them turned his stomach. Claire turned her head, locking eyes with him. There wasn't a trace of guilt on her face. No panic, no shame. Instead, her expression was defiant, her lips curling into a smug smirk. "Oh, grow up, loser." "Yeah, we're together," she sneered. "And what are you going to do about it?" Ethan's fists clenched at his side, his entire body trembling with anger. Before he could utter a word, Claire's voice lowered, her tone venomous. "Yeah, if you even think about divorcing me, you'll never see your kids again. Don't even try it." Jason, pale and stammering, tried to speak. "Man, this isn't what it looks like. We didn't mean for..." "Shut up." Ethan cut him off, his voice sharp and steady. For the first time, there was no hesitation in his gaze. Something inside him snapped, and in its place, something unbreakable began to form. He turned his attention to his mother, who stood nearby, her face pale and her hands wringing nervously. The guilt in her eyes confirmed everything she had known all along. "You knew." Ethan's voice was low and seething, but it carried the weight of his fury. "How long, Mom? How long have you been covering for them?" His mother flinched, her voice weak and faltering. "Ethan, it's not what you think. Let's just go back to the party and..." "Don't lie to me." His voice boomed, raw with pain and betrayal. Years of trust, years of love and admiration for the woman who raised him, crumbled into dust. Her silence was louder than any confession she could have made. Ethan stumbled back into the kitchen, his mind spinning like a tornado. Every step felt like wading through wet cement, heavy and suffocating. His hands shook as he yanked open a drawer, the harsh screech of wood against metal echoing in the stillness. There, buried beneath a mess of forgotten papers, was their wedding certificate. He picked it up and stared at the fancy script, the ornate letters weaving their names together. It was supposed to represent everything they built together, all the love, trust, and promises. Now, it felt like the cruelest joke. Without pausing to think, he grabbed the wedding certificate, ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper echoed through the empty kitchen, sharp and final, like the closing of a chapter. But he didn't stop there. With trembling hands, he shredded the pieces further, letting the fragments of their broken promises scatter across the countertop. His eyes landed on his wedding ring, glinting mockingly under faithful fluorescent light. It felt like a cruel reminder of the life he thought he had. His stomach twisted as he wrenched it off his finger, the cool metal biting into his palm as he gripped it tightly. Without hesitation, he marched back toward the hallway where Claire and Jason lingered, their hushed whispers cutting off the moment they noticed him. Ethan didn't need words. He hurled the ring at Claire's feet, the soft metallic clink reverberating through the space, louder than any shouting match. "Congratulations," he said, his voice cold and venomous. "You two deserve each other." For a fleeting second, neither of them moved. Claire glanced down at the ring, then back at Ethan, a smirk curling across her lips, crossed her arms, her head tilting slightly as if amused by his anger. "Oh, what's the plan now, whoa?" she sneered, her tone dripping with mockery. "Going to cry about it? Run off like you always do." Ethan didn't flinch. He met her smug gaze with a calm, unyielding stare. There was nothing left to say. Her betrayal had said it all. Turning away, he strode past them without another word, his footsteps heavy but deliberate. Night air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside, slamming the door behind him. His chest heaved, anger and pain battling for control. He didn't know where he was going. Anywhere was better than that house, better than the life of lies he just walked out on. Claire's muffled laughter echoed faintly behind him, taunting him. But he refused to let it burrow into his mind. As he walked further into the quiet night, a strange sense of resolve began to stir within him. Claire had taken so much from him already, but he wouldn't let her strip him of his dignity. Each step away from the house felt like shedding a layer of the weight had carried for so long. He didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be the end for him. Later, back in the stillness of his office, Ethan sat alone, the faint glow of his phone illuminating his face as he scrolled through old photos. Every swipe felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into the raw wounds of his heart. Images of birthdays, vacations, and anniversaries flashed before him, moments he once believed were filled with genuine happiness. Claire's smile shone brightly in every shot, her arms wrapped around him or holding their kids close. Now, those memories felt hollow, tainted by the truth. One photo stopped him in his tracks. It was from their 10th anniversary, the two of them standing by the ocean, arms wrapped around each other. He remembered the pride and love had felt that day, his smile full and genuine. But as he stared at Claire's face now, he saw something he'd missed back then, a subtle detachment. Her smile seemed rehearsed, the tilt of her head masking a distance he had noticed before. He swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "How did I miss it?" he murmured into the silence. "How did I let it get this far?" His mind replayed moments he now saw with painful clarity. Her frequent nights out, her dismissive tone when he voiced concerns, and the way she brushed off his unease about Jason's constant presence in their lives. One memory stabbed at him, sharp and unrelenting. He had confronted her once, hesitant but worried about how close she seemed to Jason. "You're being paranoid," she had said, her voice laced with disdain. "Jason is your best friend. Stop acting so insecure." The words echoed in his mind, a cruel mockery of the truth. Insecure. That's how she dismissed him, how she'd silenced his instincts, and he had let her. It had been easier to trust her than to face the possibility of betrayal. Anger surged through him, hot and overwhelming. His fist clenched tightly, and before he knew it, he slammed it down on the desk. Pain shot up his arm, jolting him back to the present. The sharp sound broke the oppressive silence of the room, grounding him. In the moment, Ethan leaned forward, his head resting in his hands, his breathing heavy. But as the anger began to fade, something stronger took its place. Determination. Slowly, He raised his head, his jaw tightening with resolve. Sitting with resolve. Here drowning in self-pity isn't going to change anything, he thought. Claire's betrayal had already taken too much from him. He wouldn't let it steal his future. He set his phone down. His hands steady now. The time for reflection was over. It was time to act, to reclaim what was left of his life. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. The next morning, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the bookmarked contact information of a lawyer he'd saved months earlier, a precaution he had never expected to need. His thumb hovered over the number, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, with a sharp inhale, he tapped the screen. The line barely rang twice before a confident, professional voice answered. "This is Helen Brown. How can I assist you?" Ethan cleared his throat, steadying himself before speaking. He introduced himself and began recounting the events of the night before. His words were clipped, deliberate, every detail raw and painful to utter. Helen listened without interruption, her calm tone a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. When he finished, she responded with a firmness that gave him an anchor to hold on to. "Adultery cases can be complex," she said evenly. "But from what you've told me, you already have a solid foundation. The priority now is protecting your children. Well, make sure Claire can't use them as leverage." Her words were a balm to his frayed nerves. "What do I need to do next?" he asked, bracing himself for the fight ahead. "Documentation is key," Helen explained. "Gather everything you can. Text messages, emails, receipts, bank statements, even social media activity. If there's evidence of financial misconduct or questionable spending, we'll need that too. And if you have access to security footage, that could be crucial." Ethan nodded to himself, a new determination taking root. "Oh, get on it." The following days were grueling, but Ethan threw himself into the task. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Every discovery cut him to the bone, but it was fuel for the battle ahead. He started with Claire's phone, which she often left charging on the kitchen counter. She clearly assumed he was too trusting or too blind to ever look. That assumption was her mistake. One evening, while she was upstairs, Ethan seized the chance with trembling hands. He scrolled through her messages. What he found made his stomach churn. There were text exchanges with Jason, each one more damning than the last. "Jason, can't wait to see you tonight." He's clueless as ever. Even if he finds out, what's he going to do? He's too spineless to do anything about it. "Claire, you always knew how to make me feel special. Jason, you still look as amazing as you did at prom." Ethan's hands tightened around the phone. His jaw clenched as the casual cruelty of their words sank in. He forwarded the messages to his own phone, carefully erasing any sign of his intrusion. Next, he turned his attention to their shared bank account. What he found only deepened the betrayal. Lavish dinners, expensive gifts, and hotel stays were hidden under the guise of work expenses. The receipts painted a vivid picture of their deception. Each transaction another blow to Ethan's already battered heart. Then came social media. Though Claire and Jason had been careful not to post anything overtly incriminating, subtle patterns emerged. Locations tagged at overlapping times. Comments exchanged that now seemed laced with hidden meaning. It all added up. Finally, Ethan checked their home security system, installed years ago for the family's safety. It now revealed far more than had ever imagined. Late at night, in the empty spaces of their home, there were moments caught on camera that told a damning story. Intimate exchanges between Claire and Jason on nights Ethan had been working or out of town. The footage was undeniable. It was all there, staring back at him in painful clarity. The process was brutal. Each discovery reopened wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. But Ethan pressed on. His pain and anger transformed into a singular purpose: to ensure Claire wouldn't manipulate the situation, especially when it came to their children. When he met with Helen again, he laid everything in front of her, reviewed the evidence with sharp, discerning eyes, her expression calm yet approving. Finally, she looked up. "This strong," she said, her tone unwavering. "With this, we can secure custody and ensure Claire is held accountable for her actions." For the first time in days, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Relief? He wasn't helpless, and he wasn't alone. The path ahead was steep, but now it was unmistakably clear. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, bathing the kitchen in a warm glow that felt almost mocking. Ethan sat at the table, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. Outwardly, he was calm, but inside, his thoughts raced. He knew Claire would come downstairs soon. She wouldn't let the tension linger, not because she cared, but because she always needed to control the story. The sharp click of her heels against the hardwood floor broke the quiet. She entered the kitchen with an air of practiced composure, her every movement calculated. She was impeccably dressed, as if the events of the previous night hadn't even touched her. Her confidence only deepened his disgust. Claire didn't look at him right away. Instead, she went straight to Fifi, coffee maker, her movements smooth and deliberate, but the tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, she turned to him, her expression cool and composed. "So," she said, her voice calm, almost bored, "we going to talk about this, or are you just going to sit there sulking?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "There's nothing to talk about, Claire. You made your choices. Now you'll have to live with them." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she looked as if she might lash out, but then she smiled, a cold, mocking smile that sent a chill down his spine. "You're really going to play the victim here, after all the times you ignored me, dismissed me. You think you're innocent in all this?" He didn't rise to the bait. "This isn't about me, Claire. This is about what you did. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And you lied to everyone who trusted you." Her smile faltered, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same cold defiance. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp. "If that's how you want to play it, then let's play. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you walk away from this without a fight." The courtroom was a cold, impersonal space, the quiet hum of whispered conversations and shuffling papers, amplifying the gravity of the moment. Ethan sat at the plaintiff's table, his back straight and his expression resolute. Across the room, Claire sat beside her attorney, her confidence reduced to nervous tension as the mountain of evidence against her loomed over the proceedings. Howlett, Ethan's attorney, moved with precision and poise, presenting the case like a master craftsman. Security footage played on a screen, showing Claire and Jason's secret encounters. Financial records highlighted misused family funds, and text messages exposed the cruelty and callousness of her betrayal. Piece by piece, Helen built an unassailable case, leaving no doubt about Claire's actions. The judge asked pointed, direct questions, cutting through Claire's weak attempts to downplay her behavior. Her lawyer's arguments for shared custody and financial support collapsed under the weight of the evidence. By the time the judge made their ruling, the outcome was clear. Ethan was awarded full custody of the children, with Claire allowed only limited, supervised visitation. Her request for alimony was flatly denied. The gavel struck, and the sound reverberated through the courtroom. For Ethan, it was more than just the end of the hearing. It was the start of a new chapter. As people began to file out, Claire approached him in the hallway. Her eyes were red and puffy, her voice wavered, trembling with desperation. "Please, Ethan," she said softly, barely above a whisper. "Let's not make this worse than it already is. We can find a way to work through this. For the kids." Ethan turned to face her, his expression steady and unmoved. He took a deep breath, then spoke with a calm firmness that left no room for argument. "Over the kids, you decided how this would end. Now you'll have to live with those decisions." Her face crumpled, tears spilling freely as she tried to hold herself together. But Ethan didn't linger. For years, her words had held him captive. Now they were nothing more than empty echoes of a life he was ready to leave behind. Jason's downfall came swiftly and with devastating force. His wife, Michelle, wasted no time filing for divorce after uncovering not only his affair with Claire, but also a string of other betrayals, fueled by anger and a determination to expose him. She unearthed falsified expense reports and misconduct at his job. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Jason lost his job, his reputation shattered, and his financial stability crumbled. Once respected in his social and professional circles, he became a pariah. Claire's life fared no better. Attempts to repair her relationships with family and friends were met with cold indifference. Her actions had become a cautionary tale in their community. and she found herself isolated. The life she had built on lies was crumbling beneath her. For Ethan, the aftermath was bittersweet. Winning custody of his children brought immense relief and validation, but it couldn't erase the sting of betrayal or the grief of the family he thought he had. Yet amid the pain, there was hope. Determined to create a stable and loving home, Ethan threw himself into rebuilding their lives. Slowly but surely, the laughter returned to the house. Bedtime stories, shared dinners, and small victories brought joy back into their days. His children began to thrive under his care, their smiles becoming brighter, their trust in him growing stronger. Though the weight of the past lingered, Ethan saw a path forward. His family, fractured as it was, had found strength in starting over. One afternoon, while picking up his youngest from an after-school art program, Ethan met Sophia. She had a natural warmth about her, a kindness that radiated through her smile and put everyone around her at ease. Sophia was the program's art teacher, her passion evident in the way she spoke to the children. Enthusiasm lighting up even the smallest moments. Their first conversation was easy and light, just polite introductions and small talk. But as the weeks went by, their paths began to cross more often. Casual greetings turned into longer conversations, and Ethan found himself looking forward to these encounters. Sophia was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the chaos he had endured. She was grounded, compassionate, and refreshingly genuine. Their relationship developed slowly, naturally. Neither of them felt the need to rush something that felt significant. Ethan admired how easily Sophia connected with his children. Her patience and creativity made her an instant favorite, and she introduced them to new activities, painting under the sun in their backyard or crafting on rainy afternoons. The kids adored her, and her presence brought a balance and lightness to their lives. Sophia, in turn, respected Ethan's need for space as he navigated his emotions. She listened without judgment and encouraged him to see his own strength, gently reminding him of his worth. Their bond deepened, not out of desperation, but out of a quiet understanding and mutual respect. One evening, after a family dinner Sophia had helped prepare, Ethan found himself watching her as she laughed with his children. She fit seamlessly into their world, her joy and warmth lighting up the room. In that moment, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time, hope felt tangible. Sophia wasn't just a source of love and support. She was a reminder that life could be rebuilt and that happiness was still within reach. Together, they began building a future rooted in trust, love, and the lessons of the past. The echoes of his recent past hadn't completely faded. In the weeks following the court ruling, ghosts of his old life found their way back to him. Claire was the first, her sharp confidence now replaced by a fragile desperation. The children were upstairs, unaware of the tension unfolding at the front door. "I just need your forgiveness," Claire said, her voice trembling as she stood in the doorway. "Please, Ethan, I've lost everything. I'm trying to make things right." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his gaze steady. For a long moment, he studied her, as though weighing her words. Finally, he spoke, his tone calm but unyielding. "Forgiveness isn't something you demand, Claire. It's something you earn. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever be able to give it to you." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan shook his head, his voice steady but firm. "I'm not saying this to hurt you, but you need to understand, some things can't be undone. I've moved on, Claire. You should too." Her shoulders slumped, the finality of his words leaving no room for argument. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her figure fading into the night. Ethan closed the door, standing in the quiet for a moment. The encounter stirred feelings he thought he had buried, but the sound of his children's laughter upstairs reminded him of what truly mattered. Claire no longer held any power over him, and that was a victory he would hold on to. A week later, it was his mother who reached out. Her message was hesitant, apologetic, asking him to meet for coffee. Ethan agreed, sensing her need for closure. When they met, she struggled to find her words, her remorse written all over her face. "I failed you," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting you, but I see now I was wrong. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am." Ethan listened, his emotions conflicted. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I can't pretend it didn't hurt," he said quietly, "but I know you thought you were doing the right thing, even if it wasn't." The conversation didn't fix everything, but it was a step toward healing. Trust wouldn't return overnight, but her willingness to admit her mistakes was enough to begin mending their fractured relationship. Life moved forward, one small step at a time. Ethan focused on his children and the life they were building together. The pain of the past remained, but it no longer defined him. With Sophia by his side and his children thriving, he saw a future filled with possibility. His journey had been one of heartbreak, betrayal, and hard-earned healing, but it had also shown him the power of resilience. By piece, he was creating a life filled with love, trust, and hope, a life worth living. The morning sun bathed the garden in golden light, the warmth of spring infusing the air with a sense of renewal. Ethan stood at the altar, his heart racing. His children, friends, and family surrounded him. The moment felt like a quiet triumph, a far cry from the darkness he had once endured. Sophia walked toward him, radiant in her simple white dress, her smile soft and confident. She was the embodiment of everything that had drawn him to her quiet strength, her patience, and her unwavering belief in him. She had not only healed him but reminded him of his own capacity for love and resilience. As they exchanged vows, Ethan felt an overwhelming gratitude swell in his chest. Sophia wasn't just a partner. She was the life he thought he'd lost, returned to him in a form he never expected. Sliding the ring onto her finger, he felt not just love, but a sense of renewal, as though he had finally arrived at the place he was always meant to be. Later that evening, as the festivities wound down, Ethan and Sophia sat together on a bench beneath a canopy of string lights. His children's laughter rang out in the distance, carried on the gentle evening breeze. Ethan turned to Sophia, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could have done this without you," he said, his hand clasping hers. Sophia smiled, her gaze warm and steady. "You didn't need me to do this," she replied gently. "You just needed someone to remind you of who you are. The rest was always in you." Her words settled over him, soft but powerful. And for a moment, Ethan allowed himself to reflect. The betrayal that had once consumed him felt distant now, its sharp edges dulled by time and understanding. Claire and Jason's actions had been devastating, but they had also been a catalyst, a breaking point that forced him to rebuild himself from the ground up. Without their betrayal, he might never have found the clarity to recognize the kind of love and life he truly deserved. As he watched Sophia laugh with his children, a realization struck him with quiet certainty. The best revenge wasn't seeing Claire and Jason suffer the consequences of their choices. It wasn't bitterness or resentment. The best revenge was this: a life filled with love, joy, and purpose, so full that their betrayal became irrelevant. It was choosing to rise above the pain and create something extraordinary in its place. For the first time, Ethan felt a peace so profound, it left him weightless. His life wasn't perfect, but it was his, a life built on resilience, surrounded by people who mattered, and guided by a love that was genuine and enduring. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Ethan leaned back and gazed upward, a quiet smile playing on his lips. The past no longer had power over him, its grip loosened by time and growth. What had once been a story of heartbreak and betrayal had transformed into something far greater, a testament to strength, healing, and renewal. The greatest pain, he realized, often leads to the greatest growth, and with that truth, Ethan made a choice to leave the past behind and a choice fully embrace the life he had built. It was a life worth living, not for the scars that remained, but for the beauty that had blossomed from them. And as laughter and love surrounded him, Ethan knew he had finally stepped into the life he wasn't always meant to have.